is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into a brand new edition of the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com, 365 Sports. I'm Craig Smoke, 365 Sports host, site writer, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, Sic'Em365.com. And we come to you following another disappointing loss for Baylor football last Thursday night in Morgantown, West Virginia, 43-40 at the hands of the Mountaineers. Baylor now 3-3 on the year and 1-2 in conference play. West Virginia now 3-3 on the year, 1-2 in conference play, and instead of bringing up the back of the standings, they are now at least ahead of Baylor moving forward as their records remain the same. But, of course, now West Virginia with a tiebreaker and the head-up win. And from here on out, it will be 6 more games, and we'll see if there's any more after that. But for the time being, Baylor back at home and now hosting Kansas. With or without Jalen Daniels, most likely without, but they're going to probably keep that a little bit of a secret, much like Baylor will probably not reveal too much around Blake Shapen and exactly how healthy they are going into Saturday. So a lot in play since we last talked to you. Again, Craig Smoke with you, Grayson Grundhafer, and Grayson, man, tough outing in Morgantown, and here we are, and the Bears back at home and kind of in need of a win here.
Yeah, the Bears continuing to just find ways to lose football games. I mean, it's just been a common trend, right? And in the 2 seasons that they had these, epic runs, which were 2019 and 2021, the thing that those 2 teams had in common were they were able to win the close games, and they were able to not shoot themselves in the foot and lose games. And, this one was just, it was really tough to watch. And I tweeted after the game, this wasn't Baylor football, what I saw on Thursday night. The defense was just, they look lost. The turnovers, the special teams blunder once again. I mean, everything that could go wrong did. And even though there were some bright spots, the overwhelming thought after the game was, what is going on with this team? Because that performance was just, it was not very good at all.
Yeah, I don't want to go over the entire game because there's 83 points scored, and that would just take an hour and a half to get through every single, wave of what happened. But, basically on the Baylor side of things, 300-plus yards from Blake Shapen, who was very effective, but had a bad turnover. Just dropping the football turned into a scoop and score for West Virginia that completely flipped the momentum and probably the outcome of that game, quite frankly. So his one mistake, if you want to call it that, was massive, despite how well he actually played. Then, of course, he gets hurt and knocked out of the game. Kyron Jones comes in, plays relatively well. He has a really bad turnover, and then late, just, young man, the clock's running. You got to do something, and instead they just run out the clock, basically, to end the game, even though at that point it was, low percentage, but still, it was just, you got to be aware of those things. So quarterback, I think overall, you probably say thumbs up, but a couple of things that were, leaning it more towards the middle. But that wasn't the issue overall, was quarterback play. Running game, pretty ineffective once again, ending up with less than 200 yards. They have no real number 1 running back. It's just your guess is as good as mine as to who's going to get a carry at any given moment. There's no real fluidity, it feels like, or real formula. And I'm sure they have one, but it's just hard for us at home to really gather because it's just is Squirrel there or not? Okay,
well, Squirrel got hurt.
No, so, I know. I'm just saying, though, at any given time, is he healthy? Why has he only got 2 carries? And now we know, he's hurt because we saw him on the ground and out. But, I think there are people wondering, where's Richard Reese at one point? And then, is Quaylen now? There's that whole thing going on. Receiving-wise, Gavin Holmes was a monster, had a huge, huge game. Outside of that, Drake Dabney had a really nice night. Monterey Baldwin had a couple of balls, and that was about it. And, that was the Baylor offense for, I guess, starters kind of dipping into this side of the game.
Yeah, so, I did want to highlight that turnover by Shapen because it's big enough to kind of examine on a little further. So, yeah, there's 4:16 left in the second quarter, and Blake Shapen pops off that huge pass to Gavin Holmes for 46 yards. They get to the West Virginia 26. It's 1st and 10 with 2:41 left in the half. You got to take care of the football. I mean, you're just going to run the ball. You're either going to score a touchdown there or kick a field goal, and then you go to half. You're either up 24-10 or 20-10 at halftime, and you're, in my eyes, feeling so much better. I know they end up scoring before half, so it's 24-17, so you still have the 7-point lead, but I think that gave West Virginia just this renewed confidence, and it got the crowd back into it, and Baylor had just been moving up and down the field until that moment. That was a huge play, and I do feel like if that play doesn't happen, Baylor probably runs away with this game, to be honest with you, the way the offense was playing. So just wanted to highlight that really quickly. I felt like offensively they were really good, though. I mean, Chapin, 326 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. You mentioned the receivers that got involved. There were quite a few of them. I know Ben Sims had a rushing touchdown as well, so he got involved in that space, but I felt like overall, Chapin was really in control of this offense. It was the best game I've seen him play to date outside of the first half against Oklahoma State. He was just money, and he was moving them up and down the field on the road in Morgantown. He really gave you this sense of comfort and confidence that they were going to continue moving the football the entire game. Like, with him in, it really felt like they could score 50-something points on the road. He was playing that well. And, of course, he gets banged up, and it's just really unfortunate. I know Kyron came in and played well, but, here's the difference. Kyron Drones, 6.8 yards per completion. Blake Chapin was at 14.8 yards per completion. It was ridiculous what he was doing. But sadly, he gets hurt, and then everything kind of collapses because, once again, Baylor is a good running football team, but their identity is being a great running football team, and they're not that. And that was a huge hindrance for this team, I felt like, once Chapin went out. But not the only hindrance, because obviously their problems on the other side of the ball were just baffling.
Yeah, in the first half, West Virginia got on the board early, right out of the gates, basically 7-0, and you're kind of like, uh-oh, because Baylor did nothing, and then here's West Virginia, and so it's 7-0. They're able to manage a field goal after a 71-yard drive, 40-yarder for John Mayers. That was your first quarter, 7-3. A little bit disappointing at that point. The offense just flipped it on. You had the Sims touchdown run to cap off a drive that you're talking about. That was very quick, 2.5 minutes, 85 yards, and boom, all of a sudden it's 10-7. Another score 3 minutes later. You hit Gavin Holmes for a huge pass of 35, 3-play 70-yard drive, 1:23. It's like, boom, the burners are on, and here's Baylor football the way you've been waiting for it to be. And then, give up the field goal, give up the fumble return for a touchdown, and all of a sudden it's 17-17. And fortunately, you're able to scrape together a really nice score right before the half when Craig Williams was actually healthy, and you hit him on a big pass, and you at least went in somewhat respectably because you were able to score there at the end. But, what should have been – or what was a very one-sided second quarter, especially because of one turnover, turned into a 1-point or a one-score lead at halftime. So that was my first kind of moment of, uh-oh, this is still a little bit too close for comfort, and they're at home, or they're on the road, and West Virginia's at home, and that fumble return, like, you could just feel like you gave them like a bonus life, like in a video game. It's like they were ready to be put out of their misery already at halftime, and then that play happened, and it was like the whole thing turned around and flipped on its head. So in the second half, it was a matter of just building on that lead if you could, and unfortunately, they weren't able to ever get away. West Virginia tied it up and did so right pretty much out of the gates in the second half. Hal Presley caught a short 2-yard pass after Chapin got knocked out of the game. In the third quarter, Drones able to put together a touchdown drive to his credit.
That was on fourth down, that conversion to Presley. That was a huge play.
Fourth down play was kind of like, is this the game basically or not in the third quarter? And they convert and score, and that was huge, absolutely massive for this team. But then give up another touchdown to end the third quarter, and West Virginia reties the game, so it's 31-all heading into the fourth. And Quaylen Jones able to run in from 4 yards out. And then what happened here? It was the
PAT that was blocked.
How would you even describe the special teams errors this season? You line up, you're feeling good about everything. You've kicked off the fourth quarter with a score to retake the lead, and you've quieted this crowd somewhat that really was not in the game whatsoever again until that fumble return, and even then you knocked them back out of it. But it's like you kept giving the road crowd every reason to stay in the game. Like, I just could. I was just like, you're making it so hard on yourselves.
They wanted to yell, fire Neil Brown. They were ready.
They were like ready. The crowd showed up apathetic. They didn't care. We tried to build it up like they were going to be ready for it, and I was even wrong in that. Like, West Virginia fans were not like riled up and ready for this. They were basically like going to a funeral, and it's like every time you started throwing dirt on the grave, it's like Baylor's like, nuh-uh, like, here, let's get that out of the way for you. So they, go up and score to take the lead. Grayson, and then, blocked extra point, return for 2. Guy just basically goes right up the middle, unblocked. I've seen the video. Somebody pointed out to me. I have no idea what was going on in that play, and I don't know, man. There's just, like, no effort that was to be had on the block in that extra point, and
I think it was Stills, too, right? I think it was their best player who blocked it.
Jacoby Spells.
Oh, Okay, yeah. It wasn't Stills. Okay.
That's listed. I guess he ran it back. I don't know if Stills maybe blocked it. Yeah. I don't recall.
I'm just saying that because I think Stills literally just right up the middle. Their best player, you didn't block
whoever
him.
It was went up right up the middle, unblocked. So I mean, whoever you want to point the block towards, I don't recall right off the top of my head, but all I recall is the video I watched of whoever the Baylor lineman was, just not ever even moving, and the spot that he was in exactly being the spot where the ball gets blocked. So I still haven't seen a proper explanation for what happened there. But just more bad special teams is killing this team. And that's been the case pretty much all year at this point. And, I'd say it's going to change, but I don't have a lot of faith in that, honestly, at this point because it keeps happening. So blocked extra point gets run back for 2. All of a sudden, instead of being up 38-31, you're up only 37-33. And then West Virginia turns right around and just shoves it down your throat, basically.
Well, I mean, yeah, but they had the turnover on downs the very next drive.
Who?
West Virginia. After they blocked the extra point,
okay,
West Virginia
you're right.
drives down the field.
Yeah, I'm in the
Baylor
wrong spot
gets
here.
An awesome 4th down stop, and once again, you're seeing they're like, this is game. Because they're not getting a stop, no way. And then you turn right around, Quaylen Jones fumbles the football.
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at the wrong chart here. So, yes, Baylor scores, blocked extra point, stops West Virginia on downs, and then, yes, 2 plays into that drive, Quaylen Jones. I mean, it was a good hit, but, it was a good hit, but, at that point in the game, given your responsibility, there is no excuse for fumbling the football in that situation.
At the West Virginia 28, you got a young quarterback.
Yes.
You just need to grind out this drive, score with 5 minutes left, go up by 42-33, put the game away, and Fump puts the ball on the turf.
And instead, they hold on to the ball for all of 46 seconds, and West Virginia gets it right back 6 plays later. They're able to run it in from 34 yards out on 2nd down and 10 as they made Tony Mathis look like an all Big 12 running back. So they take the lead 40-37. Things looking dire here. Both teams trade interceptions, which was very fortunate that Baylor basically threw the game away, and then West Virginia's like, no, you've given us so much. We'll give you at least one ray of hope here at the end, and they throw the pick to Dylan Doyle. Baylor manages a field goal to tie things up. And then a field goal by West Virginia after an 8-play, 61-yard drive gets them into territory. And Casey Legg's able to boot one through from 22 yards out. And that was basically all she wrote as Baylor tried to do something with it, unable to. And that was it, 43-40. That field goal by Casey Legg, the game winner there with not much time remaining, under 30 seconds, or just a little over 30 seconds to go, and just not enough there remaining for Kyron Drones to do anything. And I don't know that they really had a well thought out plan with 30 seconds left, because it didn't seem like it. It was just kind of like the clock just ran out basically there at the end, and it was a long shot that they would be able to, I guess, get into territory, I suppose, but still, it was a bit disjointed, that effort there at the very end.
Yeah, it was, but, I just go back to that sequence that we kind of talked about. That interception by Kyron, you have the ball at 2nd and 8 at the West Virginia 19, and it just, you can't make that throw.
Yeah.
You just can't make that throw. A terrible throw. If you kick field goal and then get an interception, you're in a much better situation. But either way, throws a terrible interception. Ball should have been thrown out of bounds. Doesn't happen. Obviously, JT Daniels gives it back to Dylan Doyle. But this drive right here where John Mayers hits the 44-yard field goal, Baylor goes 4 plays in a minute 32 and went absolutely nowhere.
Yep.
You had so many chances. You've been dialing up a great game plan, and you come out with an opportunity to win the game with 3:12 left, and you get 0 yards, and you force a 44-yard field goal. Like, you could have won the game still. They gave you an opportunity to win this game, and Baylor couldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, 1st and 10 at the West Virginia 26-yard line. Richard Reese run for a loss of 4. 2nd and 14, Kyron Drones pass for 4 yards to Ben Sims. So you just by 3rd down are right where you started the drive at. And then Kyron Drones pass incomplete. So, yeah, loss of 4, gain of 4, incomplete pass, 44-yard field goal. That started at the West Virginia 26-yard line and ended up in a field goal from 44 yards out, kicked from the West Virginia 26-yard line.
Yep. It gave you another chance. I mean, it gave you a chance to win this game. Didn't take advantage of it. That was Baylor gave them chances to win the game. I'm not, disputing that. But Baylor had an opportunity late in this game to just say, you know what, we're going to handle business now. We've messed around too much. And they couldn't get it done. The offensive line couldn't get it done. Kyron Drones couldn't get it done. It didn't come together. Mayers made a great field goal, and that's awesome. But at the end of the day, they need a touchdown there. They need to win this game right then and there, and they couldn't do it. And so just truly disappointing effort. We haven't even really talked about the fact that literally every time we've talked about a bad Baylor play, it's West Virginia touchdown, West Virginia touchdown. I mean, the defense was just dreadful.
Yeah, we can unpack it however we want to, but that being such a high-scoring game, it's like let's run through kind of the highlights and lowlights there. And as you can tell, the somber reaction to running through that there, it's like, yeah, there were some good plays. Gavin Holmes played well. Blake Shapen played well. But outside of that, it was pretty much a horror show of mistakes and just miscues. And overall, in particular, the offense was great. Defense was unable to get off the field. And when they did, they got no help on, whoever was rolling in right after them, whether it be special teams or the offense. Like, this team just does not play complementary football very well. And you give credit to West Virginia. Like, Tony Mathis had a big game. JT Daniels made some tough plays. He had all day, basically, to sit back there. But, their defense made some stops, got a couple turnovers, and you give credit to them. But, man, when I say that this crowd was not into this game at all at the start, and the Baylor basically forced West Virginia into having a hot crowd, that's the truth. And that was just mind-boggling to me. But, yeah, a very winnable game, which is something we've repeated ad nauseum this year, it feels like. But we've done it, at least 3 times now at this point. And not trying to be too negative, it's more frustrating for them than it is for us just being observers of it. But there's not really a whole lot of ways to be other than negative following that particular game, because that was how could you not be negative after that game? Truly, it was as frustrating as it gets, I think, for everybody watching on Thursday night. And another one where you go, should have won that one. And instead, here you are now at 3-3, and we've been saying it for like week after week now at this point. But look, you're halfway through the year. Like, there really is no wiggle room here anymore. You've basically used it up at this point. If you wanted some wiggle room, like, now you have no choice but to go exactly what you did the first half of the season. I guess arguably a tougher schedule to even make a bowl game at this point. So, just a game where you're kind of left banging your head against the wall a little bit.
Yeah, and definitely not arguably, because you got to play Albany and Texas State for 2 of those wins. But, yeah, this is as bad as it gets. And once again, here we go. We're going to sit here and go, Baylor had 0 sacks again. So, once again, they're not influencing opposing quarterbacks at all. They had 1 QB hurry. I'm just going to go forward with the belief that this is just who they are, pass rushing. And I know last year they got off to a slow start. I understand that. But by this point last season, they had shifted that because they had 6 sacks against West Virginia at this same point last year. They need to figure out a new strategy, because what they're doing right now is not working, getting after the quarterback. And that was probably the number one reason why they lost this game. The missed tackles. Yeah. There was a lot
bad timing with the turnovers.
Yeah. The missed tackles were something that we haven't seen from this team.
Oh, no, that was pathetic. Really. Yeah. And, I want to make sure I'm not, like, just ragging on dudes and whatnot, but, come on. Like, if you watch that game, am I really lying by ragging on the tackling here? And I think I'm just being honest is what I'm being.
And it was the same thing we saw against there were a couple things. But against Oklahoma State, one huge problem Baylor was having was they were hitting the guy in the backfield or a 1 yard gain and somehow was turning into 3 or 4 yards. That happened once again. But in this game, it was, oh, you hit the guy in the backfield, you missed the tackle, and then it's like Tony Mathis is getting like a 20-yard gain. So that was troubling. Also troubling was now it became receivers were catching the football and the secondary was missing tackles, or the receiver was dragging guys across the first down marker. It just was a complete who wants it more. And man, last year I would have said Baylor wanted it more than every team they played. Even in their losses, they wanted it more. I haven't seen this team want it more one time this year.
That's my biggest frustration with this team. I'm sitting here looking at the win probability from the other night, and like as of it being 7-3 West Virginia, Baylor still had a 60% chance to win that game. Up, down 7-3. They are the favorites in this game the entire time by 70% or more, all the way from being down 7-3 to when they're finally, it goes 37-33, and then finally West Virginia goes up 40-37. So they were still favored the entire game. And just, and then West Virginia finally takes the lead at the end and they win the game. But, like, to your point, like, this team doesn't appear to want it. No. Like, they're not just – I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I don't think Dave Aranda knows how to really talk about it anymore. I'm sitting here writing articles and I'm just repeating like some of the same stuff, and it's just kind of worded differently. And then it's like, all right, maybe the game prior gave you a little bit more to chew on as far as like certain areas. Like, obviously the defense was very much in focus this week, or Blake Shapen's nice performance, or whatever you want to point out, good, bad, or ugly, or whatever. But like the part I keep coming back to is just the disconnect there seems to be. And, even Aranda this week, he's talking about how, like, you have to be careful, like, the way you communicate to guys to not be, like, too critical, because then you worry about, like, just the relationship piece of it and guys taking things too hard. And, like, I think we're just at a point where we're, like, this is, like, the COVID generation. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's just beginning, I guess. And people like Aranda are trying to figure out how to, like, motivate and figure out what motivates these guys. These are not Jalen Petries and Terrell Bernards. These are like a whole different breed of dudes that are, I don't know if you want to call it the NIL generation or what you want to call it. And this isn't like a personal knock on these players. It's just like there's something totally wired differently about this group versus just a year ago.
I know, but that's the crazy part is how much they returned on the offensive and defensive lines.
Like, but it's
these
true,
are the same guys, though.
No, I know, and that's why everybody expected what they did. Right. But, like, dude, you listened to him yesterday, and it's very clear. Well, like, he has no idea what's going on.
He told Smokey this, which I was like, oh, this is about the worst you can possibly hear. But it's like at some points this year, we've shown up, and guys are like, where's our championship belt?
Yeah.
And that's like... Oh, I mean, that's the worst thing you can possibly hear. That's what Texas has been doing for, 15 years. Where's our championship belt just for showing up? It's honestly baffling. And the way they, just defensively, the things that I saw in this game, the coverage is just not there. Like, again, we're sitting here. What are things we know about this team midway through the season? Their secondary, especially their corners, are a problem, and they don't get a pass rush. But then what we saw on this game Thursday was lack of tackling, lack of physicality, lack of motivation in a game that really felt like a must-win. And then they go up and just they give up 43 points. I know not all that is the defense, but as a team, they gave up 43 points to a West Virginia team that was just looking for a reason to quit. And somehow that team wanted it more than Baylor. That's crazy.
There's 6 games in. He's still talking about having to, like, generate energy for this group. Yeah. There was one particular quote I didn't, there was so much he was talking about, and I tried to write it up as best I could, but it's like at some point, like, I'm sitting here at like 1,300 words, and I'm like, I could add another 1,000, and still it's kind of just hammering home the same point after a while. But he was talking about, in particular, the lesson that he's learned from being in year 3 now. And to paraphrase, basically, he said in year 3, the thing that he has to keep reminding himself is that, like, there's certain ways to, like, talk or motivate the guys, and that he has to remember that, like, gosh, how did he put it? Because I don't want to paraphrase it and then, like, like a mom or dad of a player hears it and then it gets all out of whack. But he basically said you basically have to, like, promise guys things, like a reward at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, go and do your work and you'll get a cake afterwards. You have to, like, promise that, or, unlike Jalen Petrie or something, you'd be like, hey, go do the work, and they go do it, and, like, you didn't have to tell them. They just go and do it. Yeah. Like, with this group, it's like you have to, like, promise something at the end of the rainbow to get them motivated to go and do something. And I know that might be a generational thing, and I don't want to talk like Mr. Old here of, this group doesn't know how to, but it was the way that he said it, and I'm trying to find it here.
Yeah, I mean, I think just based on what we saw, it does appear to be a motivation thing. And it really stinks because the offense played so well, especially the passing game, and you just felt like it might all finally be coming together for this group. And to see just this lack of discipline, lack of motivation, lack of energy, it's really tough. And the thing of it is looking around the Big 12, I mean, if you win this game, you're sitting there probably in the top 3 in odds to win the Big 12 conference if they would have won that game. And they still have a shot if they go undefeated here, but it just is becoming less and less likely.
Yeah, I think it's very unlikely at this point. He said, in regards to what he's learned as a third-year head coach, I feel like not everyone's like me or like you, and so I think doing things, something for an outside reward or doing something for what I'm going to get, I think those are things we're almost training kids to be more that way, and I'm the very opposite of that in a lot of ways. And so I think having the lens to see that clearly and to always be on the lookout for that, I think is a strong lesson this year. So basically, having to be mindful of the reward at the end of the road for hard work is something that not necessarily he's really focused in on, but now you kind of have to because that's sort of what you're dealing with now. Mm-hmm. So you take that as how you will, but I took that as like, okay, yeah, this is definitely kind of a different thing he's working with at this point. And given the results, that's concerning. If it was, 5-1, you'd be like, okay, whatever works. You got to do what you got to do. But, it's not working in as far as finding success so far. So that's a bit concerning, no doubt about it. That he can't get a pulse still or the proper kind of feel for what makes this team click and go. They're still trying to figure that out. The players, I don't know. I suppose they're trying to figure it out, but I kind of wonder, like to your point a second ago, of like, do they care? Like, I honestly, I think people are wondering that. Is like, do they care? I think they do. I think that was a really tough loss they took the other night. I think that hurt. But, like, are we going to see them coming out on fire on Saturday? Like, I probably not, based on what we've seen so far, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think
you'd hope so, but how many times are we going to keep doing this?
I mean, if there's a cure, it's definitely still Kansas.
Sure.
I mean, at home. I mean, and I know everyone wants to say Kansas is so good this year. So many people have been saying that. Yeah, they just got bullied by Oklahoma. So if there is a team that you're going to turn around and be like, hey, we're going to out-physical you, we're going to maul you up front, this is the one to do it. And they have, 2 more games that are kind of very similar to that in regards to they should be able to win up front. But if they don't get more physical, like if that doesn't change this weekend, I don't know when it ever will. And it's really simple, this RVO scheme, like you got to dominate up front. You have to be the more physical football team, and Baylor was that all last year. And so now we're sitting here going, okay, did Baylor really turn into a finesse team over one offseason?
They get soft, basically? Yeah. It looks like it. I mean, and
maybe it looks Khalil like Keith being gone is just really impacting them offensively, and Abram.
Then he needs to be the MVP of the team.
Yeah,
without having even played. If he's that much of a difference maker, that they went from motivated, hungry, and physical to the point of, like, basically they've had their identity stolen from them. Their identity is now in Lubbock. The identity that they've built over the last few years, that's now basically been hijacked and taken to Lubbock in so many ways. I'm not saying like the results are. But, like, talk about a team that comes out with swagger no matter who they're playing. Yeah. They're going to come out, hair on fire. They're going to smash you in the mouth. You're going to know that you played them afterwards. It's not going to be some cakewalk.
I wouldn't call Tech the most physical team. Like, they don't really dominate you.
Dude, they play,
they play hard.
We want to split hairs. They play hard. That's the point. They play hard. Is this team playing hard to you? No. And that's what I'm saying is, like, whether or not there's something backing it up, there's at least somebody out there who's like, that they are giving every single drip drop of whatever they've got, and they're leaving it all out on the field. No matter what the no matter who the quarterback is, no matter where they're playing. And it doesn't always work, but if you and there's other examples, not just that team, but they come to mind as far as like that mentality that we've seen and we're familiar with. There's other ways of doing it, other things to call it, But, that's entirely missing right now from this team. Like, there's not that – like, we're sitting here questioning of whether we're even going to see, like, a full effort on Saturday versus Kansas. So, like, what version's going to show up? Would we have ever questioned that in the last few years? No. Never, dude. Never.
Even in 2020.
Exactly.
I mean, for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even know who was going to be suiting up that. And so basically, that's what I think is the most concerning is, like, where did all that go? Like, and did that go away just with one championship? Like, did all of that motivation and hunger and everything go away with just a handful of guys to the pros? Apparently so, know?
It's just very interesting when I sit here and I go, okay, so this offseason, you made the shift to Shapen, and I agreed with it. I think everyone agreed with it. And you lose all these guys to the pros, but it's just, and I know Khalil Keith hasn't been there, and losing Abram and Treston, like, that's big for the run game, but it just feels as though they are deciding that they're going to turn around and just air it out and be, finesse. That's the only word I can, say for it is they've decided to go from this physical, pound you in the mouth football team to, hey, you know what? We're going to air it out. We're going to be a finesse team. We're going to spread you out. I just don't know I mean, it's not that I don't know. It clearly has not worked. So whatever they did last year, they need to get back to that. And you can still have fun. You can still throw the football and take deep shots. They did that last year, and they can be more explosive this year. But you got to be able to run the football. And right now, what they're doing in the run game is just plain and simply shocking to me, that it has been this mediocre for the entire year so far. It's just crazy. At least Kansas is a cure for that, but who knows if it will be.
Yeah, we have no idea if it will be or not. I mean, they seem to be pretty much the favorites wherever you look. I did see the line drop a little bit after initially being released. I haven't checked it in the last day or so, but Baylor favorites. I just,
it was 8 last I looked. But
okay, I thought it might have dropped to like 7.5 or something, but maybe it's gone back up. I don't pay attention to it that closely, but I did notice. I was curious when it varied.
7 now, or no, 8. Sorry.
Okay, I was gonna say but that wouldn't be surprising necessarily. I mean, kind of given what's going on, but game at home, you would hope that there's motivation, but. Again, I think we were kind of expecting that when they took the field against West Virginia, and then we didn't see that. And so that's why we're sitting here kind of scrambling for answers as to what ails this team motivation-wise and fire-wise and those types of things. Because it'd be one thing if they were going out there and playing lights out, to the wall, and then West Virginia kicks the field goal and beats them. You just be like, man, this is rotten luck. But that's not what's going on. It's more like they're just not coming out the fiery way that we've kind of become used to seeing them, and the play is to the point of you just kind of wonder of like how much they really even care what the result is. And I think that that's a pretty damning indictment of kind of what we've seen, and being careful as to not, make it, anything personal by any means, but it's a question that now looms at 3-3 of, okay, are they really, like, is this something that the fans want more than the team itself? Like, are we caring too much about this? And should we just be like, hey guys, go out there and have fun? I don't know. But, Kansas, you would think would be a pretty good barometer. Well, every game is, but this one is certainly the next one. And so this game will serve as the next barometer. So Grayson, for Kansas, Lance Leipold and company have had a great year. It's recently taken a dip because they've lost 2 in a row. All this comes on the heels of losing their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, to injury. Got hurt in the TCU game, as that was their first blemish. And then, turn around and get beat by Oklahoma, sans Daniels. Jason Beanie come in relief against TCU, nearly took him to victory. Had a rougher outing last week where he kind of resorted back to more of his normal, had a couple of interceptions. And I think that's kind of going to be the case with him. He's good. He's not Jalen Daniels. But they've got some fun toys, and they're very well coached. And, man, this is not the same old Kansas that we've been used to seeing.
No, definitely not. And I mentioned this last week with the TCU game. I really felt like Jason Bean had, he got the favorable option of going in after a quarterback got injured, in which the other team did not prepare for you. And so he got to go in and just kind of air it out, have fun. It was at home. And he played great against TCU. He really did. I'm not even sure that Jalen Daniels could have played any better than Bean played in that particular game. But then you go to the Oklahoma game, and OU had an opportunity to scout him, prepare for him, plan for him. And they did a lot better, yet Kansas still scored 42 points. So, I mean, KU can still move the football. They ran for 165 yards, which is actually, OU holding any team to only 165 yards rushing has been far from the norm. So that's rather interesting. Bean still threw for 265 yards and 4 touchdowns, but like you mentioned, the 2 interceptions. So I think my main takeaway here is that, Kansas, on the year, they're averaging 39.3 points per game. They haven't really scored under that since Jalen Daniels was gone. They're still doing the same thing. So I'm anticipating Kansas to come in here and look to put up a lot of points. They're going to throw the ball. They're going to run the ball. It'll be very balanced. They're going to test Baylor's secondary quite a bit with Jason Bean at quarterback. And their identity is to run the football. They're a wide zone offense. They're going to do some of the things that Baylor does offensively with Devin Neal, who's a great running back, and Jason Bean at quarterback, and they have some good receivers as well.
They scored 56 in their opener against Tennessee Tech. They scored 55 in a win at West Virginia. Well, somebody can at least win in Morgantown.
In fairness, the 55, it was in overtime, and the pick 6 made it look like they had a pick 6 in overtime to end the game. So it was, it was a one-possession game.
But still reached 55 points in Morgantown, West Virginia in a win. 48 on the road against Houston. 35 in a win against Duke. And then a very down-to-earth contest like only Iowa State and Iowa can give you, of where you still win, but it's 14-11.
Bring you into the muck.
Yeah, it's brown and dirty. Yeah, whatever the Iowa schools drag you into, that's for sure. Certainly not good offense. And then, back to business, 38-31, a loss to TCU, but Daniels got hurt. And then 42 points in a 52-42 loss last week to Oklahoma. So the point being, whether offensively, defensively, whatever, they can put up points outside of that Iowa State game. They've hit a 30-burger in every single game outside of that Iowa State game, and still they were able to win that game 14-11. So obviously the last 1 3/4 or 1.5 have been without Daniels, but they're going to be able to score some points, especially if Baylor performs the way that we saw them in Morgantown, and don't wrap up and don't pressure whoever the quarterback is, and are unable to cover in the secondary, and the list go, can't execute on special teams, can't run the football. If all of those things hold serve, then this could get dicey. If Baylor can improve in a couple of those areas, I feel like this is their game to win at McLean Stadium. Stop me if you've heard this before, but obviously it's easier said than done, not to pile on, but it's just like, this seems like it should be a win, but given what we've seen, I mean, who the heck knows come Saturday, really?
Yeah, and I mean, Kansas is very balanced. They throw for 232 yards per game. They run for 207 yards per game. So a lot of balance there for this offense. Again, they have good wide receivers who are kind of emerging this year as the offense has improved. Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, even Quentin Skinner. Those are their 3 top guys. So good size with Arnold and Skinner. Both very good players. Arnold actually went to DeSoto in high school, so he's a Texas kid. But yeah, they're very explosive, and they take shots downfield to go along with complementing their run game with Devin Neal, Kai Thomas, Daniel Hishaw. They have talent. Offensively, I mean, the only way you score 39 points per game is by having some talent. Now, on the flip side of that, Dave Aranda hadn't given up 30 points during his time at Baylor, except for twice, which was Oklahoma State in 2020, and then this past home game against Oklahoma State as well. They gave up over 30. So, I mean, the Bears have shown a track record of holding teams in check with Dave Aranda, but the past couple would not be indicative of that. So they're going to have to flip a script a little bit. During this long week, remember, they played on a Thursday, so they had a couple extra days compared to Kansas to prepare for this game. And I'll also mention Jalen Daniels, their quarterback, did not practice today, and Kobe Bryant, their top cornerback, did not practice today either. So that'll be something to monitor. I don't believe Daniels is going to play. I mean, the report when he got hurt was that he was out for the year. He quickly said that that's not true. But there's no way someone puts out a report that he's done for the year without having some substantial evidence that he's probably going to miss a few games. At least that's how I would read, unless you're just terrible at your job.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my read on the situation there for them offensively. Now, I do want to talk about their defense some, because I think it's also important to mention Kansas is not a juggernaut. Kansas isn't dominant on both sides of the ball by any means. And Kansas defensively, they are not good. They give up 30 points per game. That's 95th in the country. Their run defense is 70th. They give up 145.7 yards per game. Once again, Baylor needs to be able to run the football in this one. And their pass defense is 125th. They give up 293 yards per game. So once again, if Shapen's back, able to play, they should be able to move the ball no problem. And so therefore, I think this game's really going to come down to whether the Baylor defense can get stops or not. Because if it's the defense that we saw in Morgantown, then shoot, they might give up 45 points and they might lose this game. But if it's the defense that Dave Aranda has, had for the most part during his time at Baylor, then the Bears should win this game fairly easily.
Yeah, you would hope so. You would think so. But that's, I guess, kind of rounding back to our kind of discussion at the beginning of the show is like it's hard to say what we will see, because you would think at different points this season, like, yeah, the defense is going to show up after that, and it doesn't necessarily happen, or the offense will be motivated by that, and it doesn't necessarily happen. So the ingredients are there for a big bounce back. The ingredients are there to go and take this victory, but whether or not the chefs in the kitchen want to actually go and do that, that's what we will see come Saturday when they run out in the field, basically. And yeah, there's no other way to kind of predict it, I suppose.
Yeah, one other thing defensively for Kansas, they're 39th in the country. They have 17 sacks this year. So a couple guys to keep an eye on. Lonnie Phelps, he's got 8.5 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. So keep an eye on him. He might be a little disruptive for the Baylor offense. Then I was also going to say Kobe Bryant, their cornerback, but he might not play in this game. At least he's not practicing today. He's got 2 interceptions, including the pick 6 there in Morgantown. So he's a very good cornerback who's given people some problems. But in general, this is one of those games that I think is really a who are you type game. And Baylor, I said must win for the West Virginia game. I felt that way. I still feel like this one's a must win. And I think it's fine to have multiple in a row. But this one is more about a program in my eyes. Like, as a head coach, Dave Aranda, as a program in Baylor, you have to find a way to get your guys up for this game. You have to find a way to win a game in which you are the favorite, you have more talent, and you're a team that has been losing a few in a row. You got to turn that table if you want to be the program that I know Dave Aranda wants this program to be. This is a man up or shut up type game in my eyes.
All right, you ready for some questions here?
Let's do it.
Scotty B., the Baylor King, how much improvement do you believe the run defense will improve from last game to this one? I certainly hope below 130 rushing yards against a good Kansas run offense.
Yeah, you would hope, right? I do think that Baylor will make them somewhat one-dimensional. I think that's the blueprint for them to win this game. So 130.
That's a little low.
Yeah, I think they'll hold them under 150. 130 is, I think, slightly too low based on what we've seen.
Yeah, and I would say this would be automatic, but then as of last week, like obviously there's even some room to be desired there as far as the run defense goes. He says, anyways, want to give a shout out to Finn Bass from Baylor Men's Tennis winning the ITA Singles Championship over Pierce Rollins from A&M. Thanks, Scotty. Dak J8090, and congrats to Finn Bass and Baylor Men's Tennis. Dak J8090, what's your ceiling and floor for this team now midway through the season?
Man, the floor for this team is they don't make a bowl and they go 5-7.
Yeah, I'd say my best case is 8-4. My worst case is like 4-8.
4-8. So win one more game the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I think my floor is 5-7. I still think they've been in these games. Like, it just takes a player there, a play here or there to win a couple. But, I mean, these 3 are the ones where you're going to get those, because if you're not beating these 3 teams, you're going to really struggle to finish the year off. My ceiling for this team, though, I want to say 9-3, but winning out seems very unrealistic. So I'll probably say 8-4. 8-4 is probably the ceiling.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, and I know it sounds crazy to think they'd only possibly win one more game, but you're looking at this one, and then you're going to Lubbock, and then you're going to Norman, and then you got K-State, and then you're going to face TCU, who looks really good and who you haven't beaten even when they've been bad, and then it's Texas and Austin. Yeah. So, if you see 2 or 3 wins in there, great. But I'm having a hard time at the moment really getting too confident about, them grabbing a couple of those games, given what we've seen here lately. But it's definitely possible. I mean, it's definitely possible, but they got to, actually go out there and do it. So, yeah, I'll say, grab one more win and then just kind of stumble along the rest of the way and, finish out 8-4. I think it would be a tremendous turnaround for this team. Let's see here. Sammy Gracebear, with the expected return of Khalil Keith, how much better does that make our run game? Who do you think will play at running back, as that does change expectations? And we don't know the status of Squirrel Williams after he was knocked out of last week's game with a concussion.
Do we know Keith is playing?
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be his first game back.
I mean, Aranda ramped up that he was coming back, but he did so in saying like he was getting into individual drills, which I think a lot of people took like, oh, he's back, and it's like, no, that's ramping up.
That was last week, right?
Yeah.
So even if he is back
closer,
week,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so let's just say he does play, and I guess in this we have to hypothetically say he's back to 100%, which again I think it'll take him a week or two to really get ramped up fully. He helps the run game a lot, though. I mean, that's clear. That is 100% clear, because even with Abram and Ebner, there were much bigger holes last year, and in large part because of Keith. He is just a monster in the run game. So, yes, he would help them immensely. Who do you think will play at running back?
Richard Reese.
Richard Reese seems like
Quaylon
the
Jones,
guy.
I guess.
Yeah, and if Squirrel's healthy in the relatively near future, those 3, and then hopefully – I mean, it seems like Tay just can't get back on the field because they need him. I mean, he's just a different kind of running back than what they've been using.
He is, but, man, we're going on 5 weeks without seeing him at this point. So, I mean, best of luck to him and wherever he's at in his recovery. It'd be nice to see him, but I don't know what to even assume at this point when you've been out that long. I feel our quarterback 2 has more potential than Kansas's QB2, assuming both starters are out. However, KU has more experience, or Jason Bean. Who do you think performs better overall? Again, I'm assuming Shapen does not start, as Aranda did not make it sound positive in the presser this morning. So I guess let's start there. I mean, assume away, I suppose. I don't really have a strong leaning one way or the other as far as Shapen goes and whether or not he's going to play, but I like Baylor's chances fine versus Jason Bean. I mean, that doesn't really make a huge difference to me. Like, if Jalen Daniels was the question, then that would make a huge difference to me. Jason Bean's a good player. He's capable of beating Baylor, but he's not really where my focus is.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if Shapen doesn't play, just based on everything I've heard. I would be shocked if he doesn't play in this game. So I think that you got to take concussion seriously, so we'll see, how things progress, but as of right now, I feel like he will play. But assuming it's QB2 versus QB2, I mean, yeah, Kyron has more potential than, the quarterback for Kansas, but I would also say that, Jason Bean has done it more.
He's played a lot more than Kyron has, so yeah.
He's got more experience with that.
He's been a starter. Right. I mean, he was a starter most of last year.
Yeah, so I don't – that's the hard part, is that he has done it more. So I think he might play better, but the thing of it is I think Baylor overall is better. So even if he outplayed Kyron, that doesn't mean Kansas would win, though, if that makes sense.
Sammy also asked, is there any way we lose and still feel hopeful we finish above 500 this season?
No.
Yeah, probably not. No.
You lose this game, you're not making a bowl. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Because if you can't beat Kansas at home, how are you going to go on the road at Tech for a night game? How are you going to beat TCU or K-State or at Texas? Even Oklahoma, they just beat Kansas. So, yeah, I don't think so.
And the thing about Oklahoma, too, is people want to knock them right now, but they can still score when Dylan Gabriel's healthy. And this Baylor team, right now, their problem is not being able to stop somebody.
They're 4-1 when Gabriel plays at least two quarters. And they're averaging 43.5 points. So, yeah.
I was seeing a couple of victory laps. Like, well, we'll win that game. And I'm like, okay, well, if you say so. But, yeah, need to beat Kansas first. Baylor Bear 88. For a while, it has seemed like of the constants in BU football was Noah Rauschenberg kickoffs going through the end zone for no return. What is the issue in games this year when we really needed that, instead got a way too long return by our opponent? Strategy, technique, or leg issue? I
mean, he has still kicked a lot of them out of the end zone. It just has been the ones that he hasn't, it feels like, have been super consequential. But I mean, your kicker's not going to kick every single one out of the end zone. Rauschenberg hasn't been as dominant as he has been in the past kicking it out, but I still feel like he's been solid. It's just the problem is anytime it gets returned, everyone just wants to blame him, and it's like, man, they only got to return 2 kicks, and you let both of them go for massive gains. Like, that's not his fault.
Yeah, I can't pinpoint what the wind was like on any given return or like the atmosphere, things like that. So I don't want to speculate too much. And, I do know where you're coming from. However, if it seems like, if you just booted through the end zone, they might have avoided like a couple of losses. Granted how big some returns have been, but
you got to make a tackle every once in a while.
But it's more than just on the kicker. So I don't know, to answer your question. I guess if it's something that continues on, we see like some returns this weekend, like maybe we'll finally broach the topic with Aranda and see if there's something up there. But I think it's as much the coverage units as it is, in terms of them getting really damaged by it. It's a combination of both. But not sure exactly on why it's not as just automatic as it seemed to be for most of last year. Mode Up 9, you may have addressed this last week with the resurgence of TCU and Tech. Do we think there's any type of negative effects on our recruiting that are recent due to our poor playing defense and the inability to win close games? Could our recent play have had negative perceptions on our recruits, like players that are getting recruited by both the schools above that have verbally committed to us? Yeah, go ahead, Grayson.
Yeah, well, first of all, let's get one thing clear. Tech's resurgence.
I was going to say, that's where I was like, I was really kind of like,
they're 3-3. They made a bowl last year. What are we talking about here?
That's where I was about to stop down myself.
What, are they like 8-0?
It feels Alabama that way, now? The way it's talked about,
Oh, my gosh. This is just baffling to me. They are 3-3 this year. So, no, that nothing they are doing is really hurting Baylor recruiting-wise. Like, I think TCU's is troubling because it's year one and it's going to allow them to get a lot of momentum. But there wasn't a ton of Baylor versus TCU in this recruiting class. There's only a few. It really was not a massive storyline in 2023. And Baylor got a lot of their commits early. And I think a lot of those guys believe in the Baylor program. And I understand why. Aranda's got a Big 12 championship. TCU and Tech don't. So keep that in mind. I know it's troubling and everyone wants to point to recruiting and how it's going to drastically impact Baylor. But as we mentioned with the Sugar Bowl last year, I told you that wasn't going to pay massive dividends in last year's class. It paid dividends in 2023. So this, bad year, maybe you lose 1 or 2 for various reasons. But I would say if you lose 1 or 2, it's mainly going to be because you were going to lose them anyways, not because you had a struggle of a season.
Yeah, and I gave Tech credit earlier, and I made sure to point out that it was for how hard they're playing. Not that they're some great team, but how hard they're playing. And I think if we saw that level of effort and just kind of that nasty streak that we saw with Baylor last year, that's some of what's missing a little bit. But, in terms of, to make it sound as though, Tech's just having this great season and Baylor's just, this back of the pack, that's not true. That's not true. And it might feel that way to some people, but wake up and realize they're in the exact same spot. And, both could be sitting at different records, but Baylor's, I don't think that they just, completely lost their place at this point. I just think that it's, a rough year and a rough team so far, but let's be realistic about who's done what as of late, who's actually done what and not just talked about what, with all due respect. Let's see here. Bear Coog, how big do you think that WVU game was for the mindset of our young, inexperienced wide receivers? Do you think we see more confidence and fewer drops over the rest of the season? I mean, Gavin Holmes is not a young, inexperienced wide receiver, but it was terrific to see him have the game that he did. 200-plus yards, just fantastic showing and outing for him. It all gets lost in the loss. I just pointed out, him overcoming adversity on Twitter, but it's Twitter, and so people were like, well, I bet he'd have rather won. And I'm like, well, that wasn't the point of the tweet. The point was he's overcome a lot, and here he was getting 200-plus yards. That was the point of the tweet, but I understand in the loss people are angry, especially after a loss like that. The unfortunate part is that he literally is out of room at this point. There's no 7th, 8th year coming his way, so it's great to see him turn it on, but we're still kind of waiting for those younger guys to really flip that switch. And there's little signs here and there, a little Hal Presley catch here and there, or Monterey obviously is the kind of the lead dog in the pack, if you will. But yeah, how big do you think that WVU game was?
Yeah, I think it was big. Hal getting in the end zone on that 4th and 1, winning a one-on-one route, that was great to see. I think we need to see more. I also think Dabney is a guy to mention. Like you mentioned him earlier, he had a very nice performance as well. It felt like either Ben Sims wasn't playing his normal amount of snaps or that West Virginia was kind of taking him away. And it really allowed Dabney to shine. He's a very good player in his own right, so I think we'll see him emerge even more. But yeah, I mean, Hal and Monterey are kind of two guys that they really need to continue taking steps forward, and I think we might see that this week. Kansas will give you opportunities to take shots, and if Blake Shapen is there, I think they'll have opportunities, and I think they'll capitalize on them.
Doc Crowell, the offense was pretty decent in West Virginia. Do we see them keep that up, or was that just because they were against a bad secondary? I think the offense is pretty okay. I think the offense is what's keeping you sitting there with at least a little bit of hope at the moment. I do think some of it was West Virginia, but I just think the offense is pretty good when they're not shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, West Virginia's secondary is one of the worst in the Big 12. They're good against the run, so that's why they were able to make Baylor somewhat one-dimensional. I mean, Baylor still had a few running moments here and there. It just wasn't consistent. But yeah, the secondary for West Virginia is bad, but the Kansas secondary is even worse. And so they'll be able to take advantage of them. There are a few other secondaries that are very weak in the Big 12, but I think in my eyes, this was more about confidence. And I think Baylor's offense just needs to continue to get more confident, because if they do, they have the talent, they have the skill to make plays on anyone. If you get Khalil Keith back, maybe Tay McWilliams, I do think things could open up a little bit more.
If the winning doesn't improve, would you be worried about any recruits?
I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Again, I think if recruits do decommit, it's more because they were going to decommit anyways, not because necessarily of a record or how Baylor's performing this year.
As unfounded as it may be, is there any fear about Aranda's recruiting versus Rule? In other words, Baylor won the Big 12 with mostly Rule recruits. Will there be the same high development and upside to the kids coming in?
See, I think this is very flawed in my eyes, because
I saw this topic from a Longhorn guy and a Horned Frog guy last week, almost like trolling fashion, because I was like, when I first read it, I was like, that seems like trolling to me.
Right. So let me just break this down a little bit. If Rule had come in a different situation and they had a higher ceiling of their win-loss and weren't just taking whoever they could take to add to that 2017 class, I don't believe guys like Terrell Bernard fit their mold. Jalen Petrie wouldn't have fit their mold. JT Woods would have, and Kalen Barnes. I mean, there's a few, but I think everyone points to
Otto wouldn't have.
Speed, he might have. He might have been like Milton. But Bernard and Petrie, no. Like, those two guys would not have been recruited by Matt Rule if they were in a different situation than when, they came in. They took 29 commits and took a bunch of guys that they were just like, oh, we'll take a good football player here or there. But if you look at their track record after that, they didn't take guys like that. They wouldn't have. They were too slow, not the right build, didn't really fit what they were doing, and they ended up being great football players at Baylor. So I think that's kind of a misleading thing. I will say, Taekwon, that was a great get by Rule and staff. Gary, Gary was like a net positive, net even. I think
he was a positive. They won a Big 12 title, and he was a big part of that.
I know, but he didn't even play in the Big 12 title game. He was dreadful in the Sugar Bowl. I
think his appearance behind the scenes was as important as anything. I mean, you talk about having some backbone and working and putting your head down and not making excuses and just having a driving focus. And I think a lot of the intangibles they're missing this year, I think went out the door with Gary.
Yeah, and I mean, Aranda could have kept him if he would have not named a starter.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I understand that everyone wants to look at it and say, oh, he just won with Rule guys, but I want to bring up the recruiting part. I also want to bring up the fact that none of those guys turned a corner under Matt Rule. All those guys turned their corner developmentally under Dave Aranda, because Dave Aranda put them in much better positions to succeed. And that's huge. I mean, what was Jalen Petrie doing under Matt Rule when he was there? He was doing nothing. He was a guy who didn't even really have a position. they were trying to figure out what to do with him. Dave Aranda comes in, puts him in great positions to succeed at that star position. JT Woods, he was flourishing, but he really took another step under Dave Aranda. Same with Terrell Bernard. I just think people get too caught up in that and don't realize, what Dave Aranda did. And also, I mean, how are they getting Apu with Matt Rule? They're not getting Apu. And he was one of the biggest impact guys on that roster a year ago. So, and the offensive line, Jacob Gall, Grant Miller, they're not coming to Baylor without Dave Aranda. So I think we need to caution people on that and really go dive deep into the depth chart and the roster and really see who was brought in by who and who developed who, because Dave Aranda did most of that legwork.
Bears sack, the inconsistent performances from our players is surprising this year given player development and performance we saw from last year's team. Why do you think that is? I think that's what we've kind of been searching for and discussing, kind of like the differences from last year and this year, the last couple of years and this year, and I've clearly not been able to pinpoint it exactly. I've tried to kind of explain through Aranda's own words, like just working with a different kind of young person in this group versus what they were working with the Jalen Petrie types of guys. But outside of that, I don't know. I mean that makes some sense that you're just working with a different type of group of guys, and this is a different team, so naturally. But outside of that, I can't explain why. Outside of just a lack of experience and kind of edge that's been built up over time, I think there's a lot of guys that are still learning how to build that, and this is still a young team in many ways, and it's just I don't know. But how else to kind of wrap my head around it otherwise. I don't have a great explanation or succinct answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure Dave Aranda has one
no,
either.
He clearly doesn't. As somebody who's listened to hours of him at this point, like he's as of last night, he's searching himself for the answer.
I think the losses early in the year, when you're losing that game to BYU in a close one, you lose to Oklahoma State, it kind of, I don't want to say it makes sense or it's fine, but those two games kind of were like, okay, you lost those two, that's fine. You can still win a Big 12 championship. You still have an identity. Like, those were close games. This West Virginia one was just one of those where you're like scratching your head and wondering what is going on with this team. I can't explain it. It was unlike anything I've seen since Dave Aranda became head coach, outside of the Oklahoma State game during COVID, which so different. But yeah, I really don't have an explanation outside of kind of what you said, Craig.
Dave Aranda doesn't know. I mean, that's the thing. And, until he finds an answer, I doubt that we're going to stumble upon it, but that's the best that I can gather is just different type of group, basically. DWH 1845, can you explain the play of number 72 on the blocked extra point?
Can't explain it.
No, brought it up earlier to start.
Didn't move at all.
Have no idea what was going on there, and wish would in hindsight somebody would have been like, "Hey, Dave, like this particular blocked extra point play, can you break this down for us?" That would have been nice to have had during the press conference, but unfortunately, nobody, including myself, went that direction. But yeah, I'd love to know what exactly was going on there, but have no idea. That was baffling to see the day afterwards, and. I'm sure that's had to have been addressed, like if not, but I'm sure it has. But yeah, would love to know myself.
Yeah. We have two more? Two more questions. Okay.
McLean Bear 18, to me this season makes me think Baylor's a program that can win 7 or 8 games consistently, but can you have everything click with experienced players every few years and compete for conference titles like last year instead of a program that actually competes for titles every year? Do you agree or disagree? But so I guess they can win 7 or 8 games consistently, but every couple of years can have like that experienced group like last year's and can go on a run, but can't necessarily do it year after year after year, no matter the wavering of the roster.
Yeah, I would have said that. I think that they can do that. I think they can turn into a team that does compete for conference titles and does win 10 games nearly every year, kind of like what Oklahoma State has done with the 10, winning 10 games so many times as consistently as they have. But I also think Baylor will have some years where they, do go through some ebbs and flows. So yeah, I think you will see some ups and downs, I guess. But in general, this team should win no less than 8 games every year. Like, with what they've built with the new Big 12, like if you're winning less than 8 games, you're not truly the upper echelon of your conference. And so I think they need to get to that point, and I think they can. I think they can be a team that rattles off 10-win seasons rather consistently.
There's a lot of middle ground between 12-2 and 2-7, which is what they've been under Dave Aranda. I mean, that's a pretty big gap, and there's a lot of room to fall in between. And I think, having them around 7 at worst pretty much every year is pretty fair in that middle ground. I think it'd be ridiculous to assume they're going to win 9 and 10, every 2 years or every year. But to be in the mix to firmly do that, I think is definitely reasonable. I mean, if not now, when are you going to expect them to really kind of be that? Because everything they've built towards is to be exactly that, is to compete every single year and be at the top of the Big 12 every year. And everything's pretty much in place to do that at this point, outside of just, I guess, chemistry this year and experience and whatnot. But even still, you see the path, even though the results haven't been there, to where to say 9 wins this year wouldn't have been ridiculous if you really look at it. I mean, they could arguably be at like 5 or 6 right now already. So, it's not always going to break that way, and clearly it hasn't broken that way this year. But I think to assume, an 8-win season pretty much every year or in that vicinity, that's not too crazy. But yeah, 9 and 10 every year, now you're getting a little bit selfish and, that's a little greedy, but, not that far off. McLennan Bear also asks, when do you think our next strongest season occurs? Personally, I think 2024 with senior Blake Shapen and experienced skill position guys our best shot, since we'll have so much experience on O-line and D-line next year. Thanks as always. So much inexperience on O-line and D-line next year. Thanks as always for the podcast. I look forward to it every week. Well, thank you, McLennan Bear, for listening. Appreciate you and appreciate the questions.
Yeah, I would say this all depends on what the schedule looks like next year. Because over the past few years, it's the odd years that Baylor really targets for their great years, because you get 5 home games, 4 road games. So that's why 2019 and 2021, they flowed so well, because the schedules were rather easy. And so now with 2023, you got these new teams coming in, so I don't know what the schedule is going to look like. I don't know if Baylor will get more home games next year. They should, since they had to take a step back this year. So if that continues to be the case, then it's the odd year. So I would say next year is actually the year. I know they'll be young, but I think they're going to add transfers, and I think they're going to be very good. They're going to have a lot of experience returning at skill positions and a returning quarterback, and there's going to be a lot of reasons for optimism next year, especially if the schedule is as easy as I think it could be.
All right, so there's the mailbag, and do appreciate everybody's questions. Everybody, I think, is kind of in the same spot as far as, sort of worried about what the rest of this season holds, but also sort of optimistic that they can turn this around, but wary that they'll actually do it. And I think we're all kind of right there in that same sweet spot at the moment, and very curious as to see, what occurs this weekend, because I think we'll see this result and then kind of go from there. If they lose this game, then
they're not making a bowl.
They're not making a bowl game. If they win this game, then, everything's pretty much still out there for them outside of, a playoff or whatever. But, I think you'd just take them being respectable and getting to a bowl and, at least making a little run at the title, at the Big 12 title, if at all possible, would all be, fine in the long run. But it's kind of all hinging on this weekend, no doubt. So, Grayson, speaking of this weekend, let's close it out with some Big 12 picks.
All right, so in the Big 12 this week, let's start with 2 p.m. on FS1. West Virginia travels to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech. West Virginia coming off the big win over Baylor. Tech coming off of a bye. Tech is a 7-point favorite. The over-under is 67.5.
Yeah, give me Tech here. It's in Lubbock. That kind of tips it for me. And I think their quarterback room's now healthy. So whether it's Donovan Smith or Tyler Shuck or Baron Morton, Joey's going to have all his quarterbacks available for the first time, I guess, since the season started. And that's been a bugaboo for them, the quarterback spot, although Baron Morton looked pretty good last time out. He certainly appears to be the future. But with Shuck available, that's interesting that they might finally get to throw him out there and have him kind of guide them the rest of the way. But yeah, give me Tech in this one. I think West Virginia emptied the chamber against Baylor in so many ways as far as luck and just kind of all that goes. And they got themselves a nice win. But While I think they're probably better than given credit for, I don't think they're great by any means. Give me Texas Tech at home.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Tech's going to be able to exploit their secondary. I still think West Virginia will move the football, though, and put up some points. I think it'll be very close. West Virginia's been in every game they've played for the most part this year, outside of that one in Austin. Yeah, I think this will be a good game. I'll take Tech 34-30. I think it'll be a close one, though. Another close Big 12 game. What else is new? Next up on ABC at 2:30, Texas travels to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, of course, is coming off of a loss to TCU, their first loss of the year. Texas coming off of what was a fairly controversial win over Iowa State over the weekend. Texas is a 6-point favorite. The over-under is 62 points.
Well, you know that they're back when they're starting to get those types of wins again, where just managed to
pull out the sprinkler head and trip Xavier Hutchinson.
Yeah, like basically stuff like that starts to happen. You're like, oh no, they're starting to get those kind of breaks again. Yeah. You know what I mean? Give me Texas in this one. I think Oklahoma State is a very good team. I think playing in Stillwater will be tough, but Spencer Sanders is not healthy at the moment, or at least doesn't appear so. And something just seems a little off with them. That was a tough loss against TCU. I think they'll be highly motivated, but the Sanders health question has me a little bit leery about what they're going to do against Texas.
Yeah, I got Oklahoma State here. I think people are giving way too much credit for Texas for beating a bad Iowa State team and really getting lucky in doing so. I also will point out this is Quinn Ewers' first road game as a college football player. And your first road game is in Stillwater.
He played in Dallas.
Yeah, that's not a road game. That's a neutral game. You get half the crowd.
I mean, it's technically a road game if we really want to get down to it, but yeah, we can move on.
Why is it a road game?
Because it's not in Austin, Texas. It's a road game.
It's a neutral. That's a neutral site game. That is not a road game.
I don't want to bog down in the minutia of whether or not that's in Austin or not.
What?
Grayson, it's not that serious of a conversation. It's a neutral site game, what have you. I was just mostly joking. Let's move along here.
Well, he's going.
It's not a home game.
No. Yeah, it's a neutral game. So he's going to Boone Pickens Stadium for his first road game. And he's taking on Oklahoma State, who Oklahoma State is still a very good team. Texas, 6-point favorite. Way too much there. Oklahoma State's going to win this game. I think it'll be a good one, though. But I got the Cowboys 31-27 getting the big win there. Next up, 7 p.m. on FS1. Kansas State travels to Fort Worth to take on TCU. TCU's a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under is 55.5. K-State is coming off of a bye. TCU is coming off the big win over Oklahoma State in double overtime.
Give me TCU in this one. I think they keep the good times rolling. I do think it'll be a tough game, and I do feel like this one might get decided late. I like K-State still, although I'm still very curious about them throwing the football on the regular basis. But this isn't like a lockdown TCU defense like we got accustomed to with Gary Patterson. As far as they're going to shut down the K-State run and just I don't feel like that's who this team is, but they can score. So give me the Frogs at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kansas State in this one. I think, TCU's defense, I'm not sold on it at all. They're a favorite in this game, but they just had to go up against a lot of plays against Oklahoma State, play a very physical game against the Cowboys. K-State got a bye week, got all this time to prepare for them. I like K-State here. I think they're going to find a way to get this win. 37-33, another very close game, but I like the Wildcats. And then finally, on ESPN2 at 11 a.m., Kansas travels to Baylor to take on the Bears. Baylor is a 7.5-point favorite now. Over-under is 59.5. Kansas coming off the loss to Oklahoma. Baylor coming off the loss against West Virginia. Who you got in this one?
I'll take Baylor. It's at home. They're favored. They should win this game. That's why. I have nothing really scientific behind it other than that. I don't have a whole lot of, confidence. I wouldn't, feel too bad putting some money down in this game because I'm pretty confident they'll win this one, but I have no confidence in I fully know they're going to come out of the gates and they'll come out. I have no idea what we're going to see from Baylor, but if they come out with the pulse and they come out excited, ready to play, then they should win this football game. And if they don't and they show up like they have at other times, then they'll probably see the results they've seen at other times. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this team.
Yeah, the season is on the line. It's homecoming, an opportunity to snap this losing streak. I think Baylor wins and covers. I like the Bears here. I think this is a good matchup for them. When they're able to run the football, they're able to move the chains offensively. A lot of opportunities in the pass game as well. So I'm going to take the Bears here, 38-21. I think they win rather convincingly against the Jayhawks.
Well, that'd be nice. So there hasn't really been a win like that so far this year, except for maybe, I don't know, Albany, I guess, which seems like a few weeks ago at this point. But other than that, it's been pretty much nail-biters most of the way, especially here in Big 12 play. So, the season continues on. Homecoming on Saturday, KU, and the terrific season that they've had, Baylor, and the kind of up and down season they've had. Both worlds will collide, and somebody's getting a big win. And coming out of this game, we'll see where it takes the Bears. But a win would go a long way, you would certainly think. A loss, well, that would really put them in a bit of a corner with just a few games to go. But we will see what happens. Appreciate everybody for listening, as always. And we'll be discussing the result and how it unfolded and every other news bite and whatever comes from this game and from this program over the next few days when we talk to you next Tuesday. But until next time, Grayson, anything before we go?
No, just, of course, Sic'Em 365 premium side, all kinds of content and news and anything you could want on football recruiting, basketball, women's basketball, every sport. We have that covered. And, of course, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, 365 Sports Radio to keep you updated with all things college football.
All right, until next time, appreciate everybody behind the scenes, and we will talk to you next week. This has been the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com and 365 Sports.